Jax Bayne and I are going to discuss what it is like to be an autistic non-binary leader. We will talk about the need for open, safe spaces and how we can help each other by thinking past the either or binary to decolonize society to liberate us to live as we are authentically. Welcome to this episode of today's Autistic Moment.
Forever, so let yourself shine. Every time you feel you're down on yourself, look inside, you'll find you got what it takes. Yeah, I can tell you can make it, you can reach the top. Here's your chance, just take it. The ones with that.
Today is your day on today's Autistic Moment, a podcast for autistic adults by an autistic adult, where autistic adults get to be yourselves in a space that is safe and made especially for you. While listening to this podcast, you stim and fidget all you like. This first segment of today's Autistic Moment is sponsored by the Autism Society of Minnesota, known as AWESOME throughout Minnesota's autism community. As Minnesota's first autism resource for more than 50 years, AWESOME serves the whole state, the whole spectrum for the whole life. Visit AWESOME at ausm.org. Please visit todaysautisticmoment.com, where you can listen to more than 100 shows, get transcripts, program updates, and read the guest bios pages. You can also visit the Adult Autism Resources Links page. Please visit the Future Shows page to read the titles, guests, and descriptions of all shows coming up. The transcripts are sponsored by Minnesota Independence College and Community. There is a link provided to get access to a document form of the transcript without the purple-colored background so that you can print it without using up the ink on your printer. The written document has a font that is accessible for dyslexics. There are additional transcripts available in Spanish, German, French, and Chinese simplified. Please follow today's Autistic Moment on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and Blue Sky. If you follow today's Autistic Moment on Instagram, please follow us on Threads. Join today's Autistic Moment community group page on Facebook for conversations and updates. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel at today's Autistic Moment to watch any episode of Autistic Voices Roundtable Discussions. On July 20th, there will be the 1.5-hour documentary special edition, What We Have to Say. Autistic individuals will describe their reactions to the announcement by Health and Human Services Secretary Robert Kennedy Jr. regarding a study into what causes the, quote, autism epidemic, end of quote. The guests will explain how they felt when they heard the news of an, quote, autism registry, end of quote, and, quote unquote, a database, and what concerned them most. The guest speakers will also describe their ideas of how autistic advocates and our allies can promote a better cultural understanding of autistic people. AJ Locascio will join me for the last half hour to introduce you to Autistic Advocates United, an autistic and allies grassroots movement, and how we plan to act with what is happening. Look for this special edition on July 20th. After this first commercial break, Jax Bayne will join me to talk about how autistics are living outside the binary box of neuronormativity through our multidimensional approaches to live authentically. Today's Autistic Moment can be downloaded and heard on most podcast apps, including Apple, Google Play, Breaker, Castbox, Overcast, iHeartRadio, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, Spotify, TuneIn, Pandora, Amazon Music, Audible, Podcast Addict, Podcast Chaser. If you are looking for the transcripts, go to todaysautisticmoment.com, click on the episode you want to listen to, and follow the directions to find the transcripts. Thank you for listening to today's Autistic Moment. Are you looking for a space where you don't have to explain your autism to be seen, heard, or understood? We are the Autistic Peer Support Coaching Collective, the world's first autistic-led peer support coaching organization. In a world that pathologizes our differences, isolates us, and pushes toxic individualism, APSCC offers something radical: community, connection, and care. Our coaches are all autistic adults, trained professionals, supporting our fellow autistics with tools for advocacy, regulation, and everyday thriving. We know how hard it is right now. Stigma, burnout, misinformation, it's everywhere. But you don't have to face it alone. Peer support is not just helpful, it's necessary. Community is not a luxury, it's how we survive. Showing up in our full autistic selves with our stims, our sensitivities, and our joy is an act of resistance. In a world that tells us to hide or disappear, we choose to be visible together. You'll find one-on-one coaching, free support groups, educational workshops, and more, all rooted in the neurodiversity paradigm, built by autistics for autistics. Come be part of something real. Visit autisticcoaches.com.
Hello, autism community. My name is Lisa Morgan. I'm an autistic adult too, and I know firsthand what it feels like to be unintentionally harmed by well-meaning professionals when reaching out for help. My passion is to help autistic people find and use their own unique strengths to help themselves. Are you rule based, a literal thinker, have a focused interest? Let's figure out together how to use the strengths of autism to find solutions. I offer life coaching for autistic adults and individualized workshops for professionals. To find out more, go to autismcrisissupport.com.
Jax Bayne, welcome to today's Autistic Moment. I am so thankful for your being here today, and so welcome.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to be here too.
Yeah, thanks, Jax. We're going to be talking about a heavy duty topic today. Everybody knows that my focus for this year is navigating the future of multidimensional autistic leadership. And in this particular episode, we're talking about autistic non binary relationship. Binary is the barrier. We are doing this discussion in the middle of a year that has been plagued by attacks on LGBTQ people, and in particular, for the purposes of this episode, non binary individuals. And we do know that a lot of autistics are non-binary, yet one of the first actions of this administration was to write and say that non-binary citizens do not exist. And it has been very painful for us to watch that kind of language come forward. But we need to talk about how this group of autistic individuals who are non binary are, in fact, leaders in this time of attacks on queer people, transgender people, that include the non binary communities. And so I have invited Jax here today as an autistic non binary individual to talk with us about this subject. And, let's get down to business here. Let's build a foundation for this conversation. What does autistic non binary leadership mean for autistic adults to be multidimensional? Go ahead, Jax.
Yeah, thanks. First, I kind of want to talk about how autism in itself is a multi-dimensional state of existence. And I think even more broadly, being alive, being human, right? There's multi-dimensionality to every unique perspective, but when you have the autistic neurotype, what I've seen is an increased ability to think outside of the social and cultural conditioning that we are bombarded with since childhood. So just being autistic in itself lends to an increased likelihood to have co-occurring conditions that create differences in sense perception, which influences our cognitive processes, the way that we think about everything. So having a condition like synesthesia, which isn't necessarily an intrinsic or only autistic condition, and it's not that every autistic person it has synesthesia, but since it's common for them to co-occur, there is this level of predisposition to see things in this very unique and non-binary way. The problem is that I feel that the societies that exist currently are constantly trying to limit our imagination and our thought processes with these pre-existing arbitrary categorizations that humans have come up with, and they tend to be in a very limited and binary perspective. So it can be very challenging to be autistic and be growing up with this expanded perspective and vision of reality and trying to interface and relate to everybody, and then you're getting consistently denied or rejected or invalidated because others are not perceiving or experiencing things in the same way. So being autistic in itself lends to an extra level of multidimensionality. And so that can cause both beautiful gifts in the autistic experience and what we have to offer to society, but in systems and communities that don't really encourage or embrace different types of thinking, uniqueness, authenticity, things like that, it also can come with a world of pain for a lot of us.
Yeah. And that is certainly the case. And a reminder to you and our audience, how are autistics multidimensional? Autistics are neurological. We are physical. We are cultural. We are awareness. We are avoidance through masking, seeking, relational, personal, social, engaging. And there's probably many more ways that we are multidimensional. And one of the reasons I do believe that we are experiencing this giant pushback this year has to do with the fact that autistics and many neurodivergents, we do tend to put the status quo society into a position of having to think outside of the neuronormative, gender normative, sexual orientational normative boxes. And Jax is
Absolutely.
going to talk about, as I tend to talk about, that we are neuroqueer here. We don't, you know, and we are liberating ourselves from that world of normativity. And that's among the great reasons why we have so much pushback. Um, so go ahead, Jax, and continue with what you were saying, and please add to what I've just said.
Yeah, absolutely. I personally love the term neuroqueerness, even though it was originally specifically coined, as far as I understood, to refer to queerness being again a form of divergence, and then neuroqueerness referring more to the neurological divergence aspect, but then queerness also being a political term to reject heteronormativity and this idea that there's only one right way to be in a relationship
Right.
or to be in love or to express yourself in communion with other living entities. That is, I think, for autistic people, with the autos, the autonomy, the self-determination that is so important to us. A lot of us, if not most autistics that I've ever met at least, reject any anybody telling them how they should think or feel or do something, especially in a relationship dynamic. If something doesn't feel right, we will often be the first to say something or to push back against or want to leave that situation. And so I really appreciate the perspective of autism being the cultural immune center of the human species and the litmus test for how toxic the society is, like the canary in the coal mine.
Mm-hmm.
And, it makes perfect sense that if that is what autism is meant to be, and thus it is a socially positive thing for society for us to have a portion of the population that is autistic, for those who are interested in power, especially on a totalitarian level, autistics are going to be some of the most threatening
Mm-hmm.
since what do? We're constantly questioning everything. We're constantly bucking authority. We're constantly pushing back against the status quo because we're like, but why? But why? It doesn't need to be this way. And that is very dangerous for anybody who's trying to divide and conquer and create a group think, right? To control the masses. So that's, I think, in part why there has been this long term, like decades I've seen, decades long push against the autism epidemic, things like the Autism Caucus and the Autism Cares Act, and a bunch of the big IDD movements and disability organizations. They've been pushing for these incremental changes for disability rights, but without a lens of disability justice, with the intersectionality, with the anti-colonial capitalist hierarchical perspectives. So it's not quite really addressing the needs and the ethos, the mentality and the shared value system of so many autistics is what I think a lot of advocacy is like missing the mark right now.
Yeah, well, I think the movement for neurodiversity, and of course, that word neuroqueer was coined by Nick Walker, um,
Yes.
who is a brilliant scholar, and he's been on today's Autistic Moment in the past. Um, Reminds us that queer is really a verb, although my point of disagreement is with Nick is that it is both a noun label and a verb. I think they all work together, not separately. It's a both and situation, I think.
Sure.
But I think it is important to bring forward what we're all really here to talk about too is how binary is the barrier. I had been saying throughout last year, and I do hope that I haven't jinxed us all by saying this. But you know, every autistic, even neurodivergent individual, regardless of what gender they were born with, or assigned at birth, um, and regardless of their sexual orientation, uh, or even gender, we are all in one way or another gender non-binary, gender non-conforming, is are words I like to use. Um, Autistic males tend to go directly against, um, directly, indirectly, whichever words you want to use, um, push back against the gender norms. I have had plenty of autistic men who have been on this show who show a tremendous amount of sensitivity that in a culture of toxic masculinity goes well past a lot of that. And a lot of autistic women also push back because they tend to be, uh, you know, very assertive. And they also tend to be very, I mean, they'll take the reins and they'll take the leadership role and they're going to run with it. At the same time, today's Autistic Moment has hosted a number of non binary individuals. AJ Locascio, um, Oluwatobi Oruganwa, we have had plenty of non-binary people here, and as part of celebrating um, LGBTQIA plus Pride Month, and today's
Mhm.
Autistic Moment also calls it Autistic Pride Month. We've made that change. Um, we are celebrating those differences. And I do believe that a lot of the pushback that we are getting is because they do not want these things celebrated as they have been. We have been gaining a greater acceptance and almost being normalized in a culture. And the last thing the current administration and those who are pushing back want is for that to continue to be celebrated and accepted. So that I've been saying all season that they are being co-oppressed right now. Um, let's talk a little bit more because the non-binary folks seem to be the best. Let's talk about why binary is the barrier here. Let's dig into that. Go ahead, Jax.
Yeah, the more I've been unlearning a lot of the basically neuronormative and heteronormative and white supremacist capitalist ideology, I've been kind of going into decolonization and collective liberation spaces to kind of just dig into my thinking and kind of figure out where I'm falling into the trap of binary thinking. Because binary thinking is something that is described in psychology and clinical psychology spheres as often a trauma response. So essentially, when a person has a form of psychological, neurological wounding, a trauma, then if it hasn't fully been healed, when a trigger, something that is similar to the original wound occurs, that wound gets activated. A person might have a flashback of some variety. It could be just an emotional flashback, that sort of thing. But this particular wounding impacts our ability to respond and to think clearly. So when we are having a trauma response, our higher cognitive functions, the prefrontal cortex that governs executive functions, so the ability to self-reflect, metacognition, the ability to communicate effectively, to regulate your impulses and emotions, all of this goes offline. And what we're seeing is that those who have CPTSD, chronic or complex post-traumatic stress disorder, and this seems to be very, very common in autistics. It's almost a universal thing here.
Mm-hmm.
I personally have not met an autistic person who does not have some degree of developmental trauma or CPTSD, just because of how traumatizing it is to be autistic in the world right now. And I don't know if there is a place where it isn't traumatizing, but especially in the USA, it's very traumatizing to be autistic. So the prefrontal cortex is the first part that goes offline. Now, here's the kicker. The prefrontal cortex and your executive functions are what is needed to be able to think beyond the binary.
Yeah.
And when you experience a traumatic event, it becomes extremely likely to have that trauma response that is causing the inability to think beyond binary. So now we have people who are traumatized from birth, generations who are inheriting trauma that's passed down from their family because of systemic discrimination and what have you, lack of access to healing. We've got global trauma because of COVID and everything. So now we have tons of people who are stuck, and it's everybody. It doesn't matter what your gender, your neurotype, whatever. Pretty much it is a universal issue, this binary thinking. And binary thinking ultimately is just right and wrong, yes and no, one way and another way.
Right.
That's all that can be seen. We're stuck, right? We're stuck in this false binary and this false duality. So when you're autistic, depending, it can be easier to get out of a binary if you are very good at thinking or extrapolating concepts laterally and perspective taking. But that's a skill set in itself, and some autistics can struggle with it, and some can excel, just like everybody. The thing is, when you're non-binary, it's very kind of almost difficult to not constantly be questioning binary thinking. So when you're autistic and non-binary, you have this increased disposition to be thinking about either or versus both and, which is how you move from the binary thinking to dialectical thinking. And dialectical thinking is what I learned with dialectical behavioral therapy because it taught me that two seeming opposites, two things that seem totally mutually exclusive, can actually both be true at the same time.
Yes.
And if you can't see how that's possible, it's not an issue with the thing you're looking at. It's an issue with how you're looking at it. So you can shift your perspective, see a new angle of vision that harmonizes this seeming binary. And so just being autistic and non-binary has helped me have a guiding compass and a lens to look at everything in a way that is constantly causing me to check myself, to ask myself, am I stuck in a binary? Am I only looking at two options? Is this really the only way? And when you're always doing that, it's you move from this power struggle of constantly trying to fight for power because you feel unsafe, because you feel powerless in this system that's oppressing you, and you go into this different headspace where you're like more problem solving and you're more thinking about like, if this is the situation and I'm only seeing two options, it's either this or this, then the problem is in my thinking and I need to find a new way to think or to see. And so that in itself, in my opinion, is the key to constantly being able to find freedom and liberation in the midst of oppression. It's going within and looking at the way you're thinking about things.
Right.
That's like the gift that I feel that I've been given as a non-binary autistic person.
Yeah. After this commercial break, Jax will talk about how binary thinking impacts the public discourse about racism and ableism, being interconnected with discussions about gender and neurodivergence. If you have recently learned that you are autistic, you probably have a lot of questions that you need answered. You need to talk to an autistic who will answer your questions about where you are and decide what to do next. Contact me to learn about TAM Autistic Consulting Services. Go to todaysautisticmoment.com and click on the menu option TAM Autistic Consulting Services. I can give you some autism education and provide you with advice and resources so you can find out what services you may need.
Looking Forward Life Coaching is a Twin Cities-based nonprofit that provides mentorship and coaching for individuals, couples, and families, either face-to-face or virtually. Some areas that Looking Forward Life Coaching can provide services are organizational skills, time management, employment coaching, relationship coaching, and many more. Our coaches are trained in person-centered approaches, and we can provide person-centered plans with obtainable goals. We accept all waivers from the state of Minnesota, with the exception of elderly. We also have reduced rates and scholarships for private pay. If you would like more information or schedule a free meet and greet, visit our website at www.lookingforwardlc.org or call us at 612-504-7414. Looking Forward Life Coaching helps change stumbling blocks of life into stepping stones towards success.
MICC provides transformative education and training for autistic and neurodivergent adults to live independently, work purposefully, and thrive in community. With hands-on learning and caring guidance, MICC participants accomplish things they never imagined, from daily living tasks like taking public transportation or managing finances, to building and sustaining a career and lifelong friendships. Learn more about our inclusive community in Richfield, Minnesota at micc.org.
Support for today's Autistic Moment comes from Best Care Home Care Agency. Best Care offers PCA services, and your friend or family member could be your paid PCA. Best Care also offers homemaking, FMS services, and 2, 4, 5D services throughout the metro and greater Minnesota. Visit their website, bestcaremn.com, to learn more about their services. Today's Autistic Moments guests and programs bring you conversations with autistics who are engaged in the work of upholding our dignity and integrity. Today's Autistic Moment is supporting neurodiversity with autistics at the forefront of our network. Today's Autistic Moment is seeking your financial support to continue the important work we are doing together. Supporters can contribute in several ways. 1, you can make a one-time donation through the coffee icon, that's KO-FI icon, when you tap on Support Today's Autistic Moment on todaysautisticmoment.com. 2, you can become a monthly subscriber via Patreon. 3, you can purchase today's Autistic Moment merchandise, such as a 16-ounce drinking cup or a lapel pin, from the Logo Shop. 4, please share the show with others to listen to the voices and concerns from the perspective of autistic adults and our supporters. While donations are not tax deductible, they help maintain today's Autistic Moment as a safe space for autistic adults. Thank you for supporting today's Autistic Moment. As we move into the second question that is part of every show here, we know that autistics are engaging regarding this topic. And one of the ways that we create environments to affect change as autistics, Jax was just talking about how being autistic is outside of most binary thinking, binary ways of existing. And this is where we get to talk about how we're changing the rules, if you will. And because rules, you can use the word regulation if you wish. I think they both apply here. Those rules and regulations that are used to put us in the position of trying to define ourselves as one or the other versus both and. Changing the rules is how we create those environments to change. And we know that right now, those places that have been really safer, not just safe, safer to protect us in these ways, those spaces are being erased. Those spaces are being, terminated. And that includes things like DEI protections. It includes the protections for transgender people. It includes the terrible moves being made regarding disability and disabled individuals. All of these things are being done because we have been changing the rules. And they're pushing back because they want their sole ground to keep us from changing those rules. So let's talk a little bit more in depth about that, Jax, and go ahead.
Yeah, I think that's a very, very true statement. There was ground that was being gained in the DEI and A accessibility measures. I think that as conversations started to get towards anti-racism and decolonization of psychology, for instance, depathologizing natural human responses. It was like we were going in a very good direction, and then suddenly, oh no, total hijack, and now the pendulum has swung the opposite direction again. And it definitely feels like a direct, response to how things have been going. And so that being said, we can just look at this as, oh, they're scared, and that's why they're acting out like this. And so while they're doing horrible, horrible things and dismantling the entire infrastructure of the US federal government right now, we can still come together and not let what is happening and those terrorist tactics get inside and us or cause us to fall into despair or fear mindsets to the point where we freeze and shut down. Now is the perfect time to think about how to create local and even protected online communities, because some of us, especially autists, right, are well known for liking virtual interactions instead of in person often. So
Yeah.
I am in favor of doing both, right, not just local but also global and digital, um, safe spaces and communities. But really, what is happening is that, unfortunately, while anything to do with supporting marginalized communities and historically oppressed populations, it used to be becoming more of a mainstream conversation. Now we're being pushed back into the margins again.
Right.
And so that means that what I do professionally, peer support work,
Hmm.
it's going to be the future because it was the past. It's how we always have survived. It's how intersectional minorities and people who have been discriminated against and oppressed and persecuted throughout history, we have always had to come together and support each other by creating communities where mutual aid and interdependence that is sustainable can occur. That's why I'm totally reinvesting and refocusing on neuroqueer, BIPOC with disabilities, peer support. Like that's my entire focus right now.
Yeah. Let's talk a bit about how all of this is affecting BIPOC. I guess I owe the communities an apology here that I haven't focused more on BIPOC, because uh, because of how the attacks seem to be all over the board. We know of a few organizations. One in particular, I'm thinking, the Autistic Women and Non-Binary Network, also known as ON, that really has been focusing on the non-binary and, in particular, the BIPOC community. So let's talk a little more in depth about that.
I can't remember if it was them or not. I think I had an interview with one of that. If it was them, it was someone similar who was an autistic women and nonprofit in Seattle. But I had mentioned, oh well, I'm not a woman, I'm non-binary. Is it okay? And they're like, yes, yes. So I'm not sure if it's the same or not. But that was a while ago. And so, in terms of, well, I don't. really like to follow what's happening on a federal level other than, oh, hey, they have cut funding for another social service program, or oh, hey, remove the rights of another group. Like that's what it feels like is occurring. And it's been challenging because whiteness and white supremacy, as well as the patriarchy and misogyny, have been two of the main DEI conversation topics for the past few decades. And it's because these are the groups that, in addition to disabled individuals, who have been most targeted and not just like systemically oppressed by legislation and the political system, but systemic in terms of communities because of the biases that the average person, and I'm going to say that while neurodivergence and autistics absolutely can also have these kinds of biases and have bigoted and discriminatory beliefs, I find that a lot of autistic individuals have a little bit of immunity, or at least more of a tendency for introspection, or asking certain questions if they're raised in that environment and have that cognitive privilege to be able to do that. Obviously, everybody's different. But because in the USA, whiteness and misogyny are like two of the central principles upholding the entire system. Like if we're going back to the Constitution, founding fathers and the founding documents, and we're talking about how these, largely as far as we know, right, neurotypical, heteronormative white men, and then they put in their documents that firstly there was nothing about women because women were considered property, and then nothing about anybody who wasn't black, who was a man, other than or who wasn't white, other than black men who were considered less than. So it's literally codified in the documents. And then these documents, when the founding fathers who were writing them were consulting with the indigenous and native populations, like the Haudenosaunee, the Confederacy, they basically said, oh yeah, you left out women who are like half of the population, so your documents are incomplete. And they point out the issues, and yet these are still the codified documents that we've gone ahead with. So, in my opinion, the conversation of the systemic discrimination that has been occurring since the creation of the USA, regime, that's in itself a conversation about how, not just how do we survive, but how do we dismantle that system? How do we, as some people say, compost the system into something new and something better? And that in itself is a larger conversation that could be for another time. But for me, when I think about the issues that people of the global majority, people who are assigned female at birth, people who are not neuronormative in the USA, people who have disabilities, all of, people who are undocumented, all of these individuals in the USA, I can't help but think that the systems themselves are founded on corrupt tenets, and I'm not sure that we can really save this system. Like we might need to create new ones.
Yeah. Well, those documents that you were speaking of have also created foundations by which society has built upon. And I have been saying for a long time now that the moves that have been made towards a greater acceptance of diverse communities have been pointing out that those structures, those foundational structures, they're now cracking, they're now deteriorating, and they're no longer the only things that hold up. And we're actually asking a lot of people to start dismantling those foundations. And that's what is frightening
Yeah.
at this. And the thing is that while those foundations may have been made and we think they've been contributing, there are many communities that have come forward and have already started to reframe those foundations.
Mm.
Um, you know, the gay and lesbian were
Mm.
rightly accused, I would say, of, we're changing those conversations about sexuality and marriage,
Mm.
you know,
Right.
and
Right.
it would, I remember when 20 years or so ago, um, the gay and lesbian communities were facing those state uh, anti-marriage bans. And if you've heard Dr. Devin Price, he says these days that the transgender community is now experiencing those same things. It's
Mm.
just 20 years later. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's partially because the gay marriage matter has been answered. We've now
Right.
adopted same gender marriages. But now, because that's happened, now we have the matter of gender, and the gender matter is being aggressively attacked right now.
Mm.
And part of that is because that is like the the foundation on which much of society has built its existence. So, and what I want to say is that we're gonna sound like we're selling real estate here, but I think it's a wise conversation to have. Um, you know, there are new homes that are being made now that are inclusive of various races, sexual orientations, genders, and yes, new homes for neurodivergence all across the board. And we know that we like to hang on to those old housing systems that
Right.
have always worked, but these new homes are making it possible for everybody to have the opportunity to have some property of their own. And
Is
and that's exactly what is frightening people right now, because oh no, oh, you mean they get to own their own property now? Yes, we do. I mean, a couple of episodes ago we talked with David Gray Hammond when we talked about physical autistic leadership. Ask us for directions. We talked about bodily autonomy. And what David spoke of is the fact that if you look at the laws that are being created, that are telling people what you can and you cannot do as a matter of law with your body, okay,
yeah.
that is the the most important part of the problem, because when you legislate what people can and cannot do with their bodies, and remember
Yeah.
that our bodies are what we reside in for life, okay?
Right.
When we take that on and we make that, we are making our genders, our sexual orientations, our neurodivergence as the mascots for your political debates. Um, what we are essentially saying is that your bodily autonomy needs to be under someone's control. Okay? And that is part of how the binary is your barrier. Okay? The LGBTQ plus communities and the autistic and our many neurodivergent communities are saying those binary structures must be replaced. And the pushback from DEI and the pushback is just saying, no, you're trying to legislate whether or not we can create homes for us too. And in doing so, the result is being set that, certain races, certain sexual orientations, certain neurotypes, we deserve to be homeless, basically. you know, and that is why these systems must change. Uh, you know, and now we're going to talk about a perfect way to, a perfect bridge into talking about interdependence, because what we are in fact saying is that all of our races, sexual orientations, genders, our queerness, our neurodivergence, we are interdependent upon each other. We need to be interdependent upon each other to find ways to dialogue, to understand each other. And then I'm going to say one last thing, and then Jax is going to, speak here. Today's autistic moment, I created it so that those who are part of these various communities and others that I haven't even reached yet, that our voices have our safe space where we are now heard without getting into the middle of a televised debate with, whomever runs those debates. It's time for our voices to have a place where you are hearing us clearly. And that's one of the purposes of today's autistic moment. So that's why it's here. Go ahead, Jax, and take off from all that.
I just wanted to say real quick that thank you for that reminder of why today's autistic moment exists, because it is so important, so powerful, and so needed to have a place that is amplifying autistic voices without that debate, without that pathologizing or infantilizing lens, you know? So thank you so much for what
You're
you're
welcome.
doing and for, yeah, bringing me on today. And I want to say that I personally am aligned with the land back movement because I think it makes a lot of sense when it comes to creating new, supportive, intentional community living structures and systems, right? Because I've met a lot of autistic and queer individuals who, a lot of neuroqueers are super interested in eco villages or intentional communities or supported living communities that are more nature based and where you know everybody around you and there's, resources there and such. And so what you were talking about with land ownership, I personally am not I align a lot more with traditional indigenous views when it comes to land and like the concepts of ownership and property. I don't really like believe in those so much, but I do believe in like personal autonomy and, you having sovereignty over your body and everything like that. And then when you live in a community with individuals on a land, there needs to be a symbiotic, harmonious relationship of stewardship between the humans and the land. And so for me, also because in indigenous cultures, there are records of two-spirit, non-binary individuals who were not just included, but celebrated and honored in their communities as well. They have a lot of models for non-hierarchical, capitalistic, mutual aid and interdependent communities. So I tend to look towards Native and Indigenous wisdom a lot for guidance when it comes to developing new models. So a lot of when I talk about decolonization or decolonial, it's often pre-colonial. Because in what you were saying, okay, we've been making this progress within the current system over the past few decades to centuries in terms of queer rights and just civil rights and things like that. But go back before the colonizers ever came. And then you've got these indigenous ways of being that already addressed all of the issues that we're trying to now just be seen as normal human situations and
Right.
aspects of life.
Right.
So yeah, that's what I'm in. So I align with the land back because it's not about, shipping people back to their ancestral lands. It's about reallocating the resources and the land so that the traditional ancestral tribes and the descendants of those tribes who were originally caretaking those lands can again have that sovereignty and that stewardship over the land. And then we develop these new systems and communities that are a lot more intersectional, that are a lot more supported, equitable, accessible for everybody, because that already aligns with so many of the First Nations ethos anyway.
Right, right, right. Can you tell us if you are, and if other ways that we can be proactive here? Because, one of my concerns is we're so reactive, and we are reacting. Um, our reactions are valid. I don't want to take anybody away from that, but I also want to say, um, my reasons for focusing on autistic leadership here. Um, in fact, um, in my cover photo this year, I have been saying that autistic and queer people are navigating the future of multidimensional autistic leadership. And that is that we are being proactive. Let's add more layers of our proactivity here. Go ahead, Jax.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. So here again, looking at the binary and how to move from either or to both and is the key of liberating your mental state and then being able to put your dreams into action, right? And your goals into action, because we can have our one main focus. So everybody has their guiding principle or something. So for me, I've got my little intersection of identities. So I've got the autistic, the non-binary, Latina, the plural, the disabled, all these things, queer, and I have to find a space. I have to carve out a space in reality for myself. And as I'm doing that, because there isn't a place for someone like me to exist in the USA society right now, as I carve out this space, there are all of these reactions and emotions coming up, like you're saying. And so I have to take the time. I don't have to, but I choose to take the time to invite myself to be present with that reaction, that feeling. I don't have to act on it, right? So I might have this impulse or this urge, this feeling, this isn't fair, this is too much, this is overwhelming, I'm scared, all of these emotions, and then I can reassure myself, yes, I validate that. That is true. It is true. That is valid that you're feeling that way, and then I can do a somatic, self-soothing practice. It's like stimming, but intentionally, like mindfully doing something that's calming your nervous system. And then you're like reparenting, like, it's okay. It's okay. And then when you get to that point where you're like feeling a little bit more safe and calm about it, that's when we go to the and. It's yes and. So that the and is the door to the action. It's like, okay, we are dealing with our feelings, we're dealing with our emotions. Now that we've, really explored why we're feeling this way and we understand where it's coming from, are we now ready to put this feeling into action, to channel this emotion into something that can actually change the world?
Yeah, absolutely. I so appreciate your saying all that. After this final commercial break, Jax will talk about their work with Griffin Core, followed by today's Autistic Community Bulletin Board. The 4th of July is coming up in a few weeks. July 4th is not the best day for many neurodivergent people and those with PTSD because of the fireworks. The sound of fireworks can be a terrible trigger for for the auditory sensory needs of many autistics. If you are affected by the sound of fireworks, wear your noise-canceling headphones to decrease the volume of the fireworks noise, and or find a safe space where you can fidget or do something to distract you. If you are a caregiver of an autistic person of any age who is affected by such sounds, please do not make them attend the fireworks, as the brightness of the lights and the loud noise from them can have serious repercussions. Let them wear their noise-canceling headphones without saying negative things to your autistic individual who react to those sounds. They are not pretending, nor do they need to be made to feel that they are doing anything wrong. Thank you for listening to today's Autistic Moment. Autistic adults aren't getting the support we need. It affects our health, our income, financial stability, and our ability to live independently. ITI Assistive Technologies is changing that. This autistic-led team has created Decide, with tools built for neurodivergent minds. One lets users quickly pick from custom lists based on their energy level. The other guides them through big decisions using simple agree-disagree statements that match their values. Visit itiassist.com/decide for more information about downloading the app to get all features for just $5 a month. Carol Jean Whittington and I will be co-hosting the Summer of Self-Care series SOSS. This year's topics and guests are on July 13th, Self-Care Through Storytelling with Tiffany Hammond. On July 24th, Leanne Reiber joins us for Self-Care Wellness for All Autistic Bodies. On August 10th, Michelle Markman will talk about self-care, boundaries, and holistic wellness. On August 24th, Lisa Morgan will join us for strength-based self-care in a medical deficit culture. Go to the Future Shows page on todaysautisticmoment.com for more details. Thank you for listening to today's Autistic Moment. Before we close today, I have had the opportunity to look at your websites, both the one for
They're still in
yourself.
development.
Huh?
Yeah. They're still under development, so they're not super great.
Yeah, no, I would disagree with you. I think they're fabulous as they start. Would you like to talk about your websites and why you created them and what you hope to do through your life's work through these websites you've made?
Absolutely. Thank you. I'm mildly embarrassed about the websites just because they're not what I want them to be yet. You know, it's that little perfectionist tendency. So I'm trying to give myself grace and say they're good enough for now, and we'll still be working on them. So currently, they're serving as placeholders to attract people just to have information about me and the work that I'm doing with Griffin Core, my peer support agency that I'm building in Washington State. And I'm trying to create a new hybrid profession that is part peer support worker and part caregiver in home long care support. Uh, and so this would be specifically for people like us because what is existing in the USA, especially in Washington State right now, is everything is so siloed and so segregated in terms of social services and support services, disability services, everything like that. And nobody's talking to anyone else. There isn't adequate training that's intersectional, multidimensional, non-binary, moving out these individual categories. So my goal is to create online not only a centralized directory and hub for resources for people and kind of like a funneling system so they can more easily get the support they need, but then also create an online community where some peer support, mutual aid, and coordination can occur. And then eventually, I'm also going to be starting this expanded agency to offer these direct support services too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, those sound really great. And yes, they will be added to the Adult Autism Resources links page on today's autisticmoment.com. So I invite my audience to search them out. Jax, thank you so much for this fantastic conversation.
Thank you.
You have provided us with so much great information and some things that will really impact our conversations this year. Let me say that today's Autistic Moment and our network that includes our guests and those who follow us, that we will continue to be here to walk with you through these very difficult times. I also want to take this time to remind you, my audience, to do your self-care, distance yourself from your social media networks that are plagued with news right now that your brain can handle only so much. So please remember to turn them off for a while and take a break and spend some time doing something you like with someone you like and that sort of thing. Do take that time for yourself. The other thing I want to remind everybody to do is, follow Jax and follow myself, follow today's Autistic Moment on those social media networks and come and find us, and as well as the work that AJ Locascio does through Umbrella and myself. There's so many resources out there for you, and they're all here to support you. So do reach out to us and keep following us, and we will get through these times together as best we can. Jax, thanks so much for being here, and wow, I'm so proud of you and thankful that you've been here.
Oh, thank you so much for everything. This has been such a delight. It's always a joy to spend time with you.
Thank you. Today's Autistic Community Bulletin Board. All these events and many others with their links not mentioned here are available on today'sautisticmoment.com/bulletin board. The Adult Coffee Club for autistic adults in Minnesota are held on the second Tuesday of every month, weather permitting, at Dogwood Coffee, located at 2700 University Avenue West, Suite 100 in St. Paul, Minnesota. The zip code for your GPS is 55114. The adult coffee clubs will begin at 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on July 8th, August 12th, September 9th. Understanding Autism virtual classes are offered by the Autism Society of Minnesota. The next classes will be on July 14th, 10 to 11 a.m., August 11th, 12 to 1 p.m., September 8th, 6 to 7 p.m. Classes are free of charge, but you must register to attend. On July 31st, beginning at 9 a.m. to 12 p.m., Logan Sand and Lai Baumgart will present a workshop at the Autism Society of Minnesota entitled Demystifying the Sex Talk. Autistic individuals and their support systems often feel under-equipped to discuss the important topics like consent, boundaries, healthy relationships, and socially appropriate behaviors within those relationships. This workshop aims to demystify those topics and provide tangible tools for their discussion. The Summer Autism Certification virtual class at the Autism Society Minnesota will be on Friday, August 22nd, 29th, and September 5th, beginning at 9:30 a.m. to 12:30 p.m. The objectives are understanding autism spectrum disorder and how it can affect communications, relationships, and behaviors. Each session is limited to 15 participants. Register early to attend. Go to ausm.org to get more information about these and other social and recreational programs, educational events, counseling services, and support groups at the Autism Society of Minnesota. Min Neurodivergent is a social club rooted in the vision of bringing neurodivergent Minnesotans together to build meaningful connections. Its core principle is to foster an environment where all are treated with dignity and respect, regardless of ability or preferences. Go to their website, minneurodivergent.org, for more information, become a member, volunteer, and attend their events. Today's Autistic Moment is here because of the generosity of supporters and sponsors. Go to todaysautisticmoment.com and select Support Today's Autistic Moment to donate. If you have questions about today's Autistic Moment, please send an email to todaysautisticmoment@gmail.com. Thank you for listening to Today's Autistic Moment, a podcast for autistic adults by an autistic adult. May you have an autistically amazing day. All of the guests meet with me on Zoom to record the interviews. The interview transcripts are provided by Otter. The podcast is prepared and edited on WavePad Masters Edition by NCH Software. The podcast is published by Spotify for Podcasters. The music that you hear is licensed to Today's Autistic Moment by PremiumBeat.com.